The laughter had already started before she even stepped through the doors. For 10 years, they had remembered her as the quiet girl who sat alone at the back of the classroom, whose clothes were always slightly worn, whose grades were never impressive, and whose dreams seemed far too big for the life she came from. They had invited her to the 10-year reunion for one reason, not to welcome her, but to make her the evening's easiest joke. Yet when the sound of a helicopter suddenly echoed across the bright afternoon sky and everyone turned toward the school courtyard, nobody was laughing anymore. A sleek helicopter descended onto the field, and when the door opened, the woman who stepped out was the same girl they had once called the class loser. Only now, she carried herself with a calm confidence none of them had expected. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness, second chances, and believing in people can change lives, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, leave a comment, and subscribe to Little Kindness Tales. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to you. 10 years earlier, Maribel Voss had been the kind of student teachers remembered for her effort rather than her achievements. She was 16, shy, and constantly worried about the next bill waiting at home. Her mother worked long hours at a small neighborhood bakery, and Maribel often came to school with the smell of flour still clinging to her sweater. Her father had left when she was young, so she had learned early that life did not always give people the same starting line. While other students talked about vacations, new phones, and expensive clothes, Maribel spent her afternoons helping her mother close the bakery and her evenings studying at a small kitchen table beneath a flickering lamp. She had one unusual habit. Whenever something in the bakery broke, she tried to understand why. She studied the old mixer, examined the worn oven controls, and searched through discarded instruction manuals. She was fascinated by machines and systems. Her mother used to tell her that one day she would build something that made people's lives easier. Maribel believed her, even when nobody else did. At school, however, believing in herself was difficult. A group of popular students had decided that Maribel was an easy target. They laughed when she answered questions incorrectly. They mocked her inexpensive backpack. They whispered when she walked past them in the hallway. A few even called her the class loser, a nickname that spread until almost everyone knew it. Maribel rarely fought back. She simply kept moving. One afternoon, during a science project, the teacher asked the students to design something that could solve a real-world problem. While most groups created simple models, Maribel designed a small automated system that could monitor temperature changes inside food storage rooms and alert workers before food spoiled. It was rough, made from inexpensive parts, but the idea was practical. Her project did not win. The judges preferred a polished presentation from another group, and several classmates laughed when Maribel's model stopped working during the demonstration. She stood beside the table, embarrassed, while everyone watched. That evening, she almost threw the entire project into the trash. Instead, she took it home. She repaired it. Then she improved it. Then she began learning everything she could about engineering, programming, sensors, logistics, and business. Years passed. After graduation, Maribel did not suddenly become successful. Her first few years were painfully ordinary. She attended community college while working mornings at the bakery. She slept very little. She applied for internships and received rejection after rejection. Some companies told her that she lacked experience. Others told her ideas were too ambitious. There were nights when she sat on the floor of her tiny apartment surrounded by notebooks, wondering whether everyone from school had been right about her. But every time she remembered her mother's words, she started again. Eventually, Maribel developed a better version of the food monitoring system she had designed as a teenager. She called the project Clear Nest. The technology helped small food businesses monitor storage conditions, reduce waste, and identify equipment problems before expensive failures occurred. At first, nobody cared. Then a local grocery chain agreed to test it. The results surprised everyone. Within a year, several businesses adopted the system. Investors became interested. Maribel built a small team. Her company grew slowly, then rapidly. She refused to forget the reason she had started it. She wanted small businesses to have access to technology that had once seemed available only to large corporations. By the time 10 years had passed since graduation, ClearNest had offices in several cities and partnerships with businesses across the country. But Maribel never considered herself better than anyone else. Then, one morning, an invitation arrived. It was from her old high school. The 10-year reunion. At first, Maribel smiled. Then she read the message again. The wording was polite, but the private comments attached to the invitation were not. Someone had written that it would be interesting to see whether Maribel had finally figured out what to do with her life. Another person joked that perhaps she could bring pastries from her mother's bakery. Maribel stared at the screen for several seconds. She could have ignored the invitation. Instead, she decided to go. Not to prove that she was successful. Not to make anyone jealous. She went because a part of her wanted to see the girl she used to be, and finally tell that girl that she had survived. The reunion was held at the school's renovated campus on a clear Saturday afternoon. The courtyard had been decorated with white chairs, tables, photographs, and banners celebrating the graduating class. Old classmates arrived in expensive cars and gathered in small groups. Among them was Dorian Kessler, who had once been one of the loudest students in the hallway. Now he owned a chain of fitness centers and loved reminding people about his success. Beside him stood Celine Harrow, who had been one of Maribel's harshest critics. Celine worked in public relations and had spent years carefully building an image of herself as someone who always had the perfect life. They had been talking about Maribel all morning. Some expected her to arrive in an ordinary car. Some expected her not to come at all. A few were already preparing jokes. Then the helicopter appeared. The distant sound grew louder as it crossed the bright blue sky. Conversation stopped. People stepped away from the tables and looked upward. The helicopter circled once before descending toward the designated landing area. Celine stared. The helicopter touched down, and a moment later the door opened. Maribel stepped onto the field wearing a simple navy blazer, cream blouse, dark trousers, and comfortable shoes. Her hair was neatly tied back, and she carried a small leather folder under one arm. She did not look around dramatically. She simply smiled. The same girl they had once ignored had arrived. But what surprised everyone most was what happened next. Maribel did not walk toward the people who had mocked her. She walked toward an elderly man standing near the school entrance. It was Mr. Alden Rourke, the science teacher who had supervised her failed project 10 years earlier. He had grown older, and he now used a walking cane. Maribel hugged him warmly. The teacher looked at her with tears in his eyes. He had never forgotten her. He told her that he still remembered the little machine she had built and that he had often wondered what happened to her. Maribel opened her folder. Inside was a photograph of that original project. She had kept it for 10 years. Then she revealed something else. She had created a scholarship through her company for students at the school who wanted to study engineering, technology, and practical sciences but could not afford the opportunity. Mr. Rourke could barely speak. Maribel explained that the scholarship would be named after the teachers who encouraged students when nobody else believed in them. The crowd became quiet. Dorian slowly approached her, clearly unsure what to say. He had spent the morning expecting a spectacle. Instead, Maribel had brought something far more meaningful. He finally apologized for the way he had treated her. Maribel listened. She did not insult him. She did not remind him of every cruel joke. She simply told him that she hoped he had become kinder with age. That sentence stayed with everyone. Then Celine approached. She admitted that the invitation had partly been designed to embarrass Maribel. She expected anger. Maribel looked at her for a moment and said that 10 years ago, she would have spent the entire night worrying about what they thought of her. But now she understood something. People who make others feel small are often struggling with something inside themselves. That did not excuse their behavior. But forgiveness, Maribel explained, was not about pretending the past never happened. It was about refusing to let the past control the future. The afternoon continued, but the reunion no longer felt like a competition. Maribel spent time speaking with former classmates who had never been cruel to her. She asked about their families, their careers, and their dreams. She laughed when they remembered harmless school memories. Before leaving, she walked through the old hallway alone. She stopped outside her former classroom. The door was open. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the same rows of desks where she had once sat quietly at the back. For a moment, she could almost see her 16-year-old self sitting there with her worn backpack and unfinished project. Maribel smiled. She realized that girl had never been a loser. She had simply been growing in a place where nobody knew how to recognize her potential. As she walked back outside, Mr. Rourke called her name. He handed her an old notebook. It was the notebook where he had written feedback about her original project. On the final page, he had written a sentence she had never seen before. It said that sometimes the students who struggle the most are the ones who later discover how to make life easier for everyone else. Maribel held the notebook against her chest. The helicopter waited in the distance. But before she left, she looked back at the school one last time. She did not feel victorious. She felt grateful. Grateful for her mother. Grateful for the teachers who believed in her. Grateful for every rejection that forced her to improve. And, strangely enough, grateful even for the people who had once laughed at her, because their cruelty had taught her the importance of never making another person feel worthless. That afternoon, Maribel flew away from the school. But the real journey had happened years before, when she had sat alone at a kitchen table and decided not to give up. Success had not arrived in a helicopter. Success had arrived through thousands of ordinary moments, studying when she was tired, trying again after failure, accepting rejection without surrendering, and choosing kindness when bitterness would have been easier. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who may need a reminder that their current situation does not define their future, and subscribe to Little Kindness Tales for more emotional stories about courage, kindness, and second chances. And before the story ends, here is a special request. Comment, "I will never give up," if you believe that one difficult chapter does not decide the whole story of a person's life. Because sometimes the person everyone overlooks is simply someone whose best chapter has not been written yet. And sometimes, the greatest answer to being underestimated is not revenge. It is becoming the kind of person who succeeds without losing their kindness along the way.